If the councilors would kindly rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, tonight's meeting is being aired live and will be recorded for rebroadcast at a future date. And I would ask, please, if you would also join me in a moment of silence. The council has been informed of the recent passing of Mr. Charles Bernaccini on October 22nd, 2022. Mr. Bernaccini served in the United States Navy during the Korean War. In addition, as I know the councilors are all well aware, the recent passing of Charlie Simons, a Bridgewater resident, a long-term resident, and also had been most recently the superintendent of our Parks and Recreation Department, who was responsible for a great number of valuable contributions to the town over the course of many years. I know that we on the council join with his many friends in the town and to commemorate his passing. So if we could have a moment of silence, please. I thank you. Announcements from the, I'm so jumping ahead, I'm sorry, approval of minutes. Excuse me. I know that we have before us, firstly, the minutes of our meeting on October 11th, and we will not be able to entertain the approval of those minutes tonight, owing to the number of councilors who were absent from that meeting, and also we have one absence from tonight's meeting. So we will not be able to approve the October 11th minutes. I would entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just point of clarification to the town attorney. So these are minutes from October 11th. Isn't there at a particular point they're automatically approved even though we don't have quorum to approve minutes? I don't think they stay on there in perpetuity until we can?
Eventually there will be a quorum. If there isn't a quorum, then they're not going to be technically approved, but they're still part of the public record.
Okay.
So it kind of is what it is at that point.
Okay, thank you. Just wondering.
But they're not technically approved by virtue of the time.
All right, thank you both. I would entertain a motion for approval of the meeting minutes for October 25th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Announcements from the President. I have none. Proclamations, there are none planned for this evening. Citizen Open Forum. If there are citizens who would care to address the council, kindly step forward to the podium and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. President. Scott Pitta, 118 Pine Street. I am here tonight to speak in favor of, I believe it's item B under new business, the order for regarding the veterans' tax benefits. And this was something that I had asked Councilor Moore to bring forward. There is an issue that I've been running into in the work that I do with veterans. Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5. Many of you are aware that the state provides real estate tax abatement to veterans at different levels based on disability. Not only veterans, but also spouses of veterans who have been killed in action. And the amount of that real estate tax abatement varies from anywhere from a few $100s a year up to possibly, I believe it goes as high as a complete waiver of the real estate tax for the widow of a veteran who was killed in action. But there's a problem with the legislation and how it butts up against a 1966 Massachusetts Supreme Court ruling Kirby versus the town of Mendon, I believe it is. And the problem is that in order to qualify for the benefit, the veteran or the spouse has to do two things. They have to own the property, and it must be their primary residence. Makes sense. The problem comes with the ownership. If the person who is eligible for the tax abatement becomes subject to a conservatorship, if they develop dementia or some other condition where they can't make decisions for themselves, technically, the legal title to their property goes to the conservatorship under the ruling of Kirby. This also happens, it's similar to what happens when you go and you do your estate planning and you have your property put into a trust. The legal title is owned by the trust, which is also affected under the Kirby ruling. The veteran or their spouse still retains beneficiary interest. So you have this bifurcation of ownership. And there was a 2022 local finance opinion from the Department of Revenue clarifying the Kirby opinion and stating that when you have this bifurcation, the veteran is no longer eligible for this tax abatement. So what is happening across the Commonwealth is you'll have someone who, potentially the widow of a veteran who died in a war decades ago, who has never budgeted to pay real estate taxes, and now all of a sudden, due to advanced dementia, they're under a conservatorship, and they no longer qualify. And now their bills go through the roof. Whatever that tax abatement was, now they have to pay it. Fortunately, the state legislature was smart enough. Under the general law, the abatements are listed under Clause 22 through 22F, but Clause 22G, up at Beacon Hill, they put in a clause that said, you folks can elect to fix the problem. All you have to do is adopt Clause 22G. And any of those people who are otherwise entitled, except for that bifurcation of ownership, will remain eligible. Now, I can't speak to how many people in Bridgewater that would meet this requirement, what this would cost. You all have a Budget and Finance Committee. There's a Finance Committee. The Assessor's Office will crunch those numbers, and they'll figure out if the state reimburses any of that. You have your town council who can look into that. But I can tell you this is, whatever that final number is that comes forward out of those committees, whatever you see on that paper, the price those veterans have paid is more than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter. Seeing no other member of the public in attendance, we'll close the citizen open forum. There are no appointments pending before the council this evening, nor do we have any hearings scheduled. License transactions, we do have before us petition E 2023-011, change of officer, Circle K, Massachusetts, DBA Circle K Store 7517. This is the facility located at 1385 Pleasant Street, and what's come before us is a change of officer petition. And together with Deborah, I had reviewed this previously, just earlier today, and concluded that this is a matter of a corporate level officer change. It's not the case of a local in-store manager being substituted, but instead this is a corporate level matter, and appropriate documentation has been furnished to the town with respect to that. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
That's a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. If we could have, we'll do this by voice vote, and I would ask all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, I thank you much. Presentations, there are none scheduled for this evening. We could move directly to the town manager's report. Mr. Dutton, we would appreciate your words.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. I've got a number of items to just sort of give the council an update on this evening. First is the fire station. I don't have anything new to report, but I did say that I would keep this as an active capital project. I'd keep this on the update list on a twice-a-month basis, so here it is, but I have nothing new to report, so there you go for that one. I do want to give you an update on the Town River Landing and Stiles and Hart. I think for those that don't know, Stiles and Hart is a park in Bridgewater. It's roughly 75 acres at this point, after completing a transfer of 5 acres, which abuts Broad Street. We now have roughly 75 acres. Town River Landing is across the river. We refer to Town River Landing as the area where BTV is located, and what used to be the town's highway garage, we now know as Town River Landing. Stiles and Hart first. We are awaiting a grant from the National Park Service. That is still in the works. It's been in the works for quite a while. The National Park Service actually has a new requirement that all permits for any work that they are going to fund, that all permits be in hand prior to the announcement of award and distribution of funds. So fortunately, our only required permit is an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission, and as soon as we get that, which actually depends on the finalizing a wetland delineation, which is underway now. But as soon as we get that, we will forward that to the National Park Service, and my expectation would be that we'll have a grant announcement very shortly after that. So that work to do the wetland delineation and get the notice of intent to get the wetland delineation will be done this month. My hope is that the Conservation Commission can meet and issue an order of condition in December, although a lot of challenges trying to get meetings together in December, but my hope is that we can get that done in December, and then very shortly after that get a grant announcement out of the National Park Service. So as soon as that happens, then we can release the actual bid for construction, finalize our plans and issue the bid for construction work that will be necessary to improve the trails and wetland crossings and provide parking and all the other things that we have mentioned. So that will soon be underway after the start of the new year, at least the bid process will. Town River Landing, just so people are clear about Town River Landing, it's not a designated park. In Massachusetts, designated parks are protected by Chapter 97. Town River Landing has sort of been referred to as a park, and at some point, my expectation would be that I'd come back to the council and after we do some survey work, and I would recommend transferring a portion of that into actual parkland. But until that is done, I can tell you that we've had a veterans group, Fire for Effect, which several of the councilors have had some interaction with, and its creator, Al Lacerda, and they've taken sort of Town River Landing on as a volunteer project, and have cleared it out, have really done a really good job there. They'd like to continue to do more work. Had a discussion with Al earlier this week, and we were able to get he was able to get authorization from us to continue the good work that they've already done there. So that is what that Fire for Effect Foundation is doing. They had 2 October farmers markets, 2 dates in October, which I think were relatively successful. And he would like to continue that next year and get those locked in and advertised soon. And he's proposing every other Saturday during essentially the good weather months. We also talked a little bit about connecting with our engineering, our town engineer, and also roadway superintendent, and Jeff Fowler as well, to just make sure that we can provide as much assistance on the town side, and Jeff can provide as much assistance on the BTV side as we possibly can. I know they've worked. Jeff and Al Lacerda have worked pretty well together just on the farmers market concept. So one thing as it pertains to Town River Landing, and I've mentioned this before, but we did not end up applying for money from National Park Service for the often discussed pedestrian bridge, and we did not apply because the cost estimates were in the $3 to $4 million range for constructing, planning and constructing that bridge, and that at this point it was just cost prohibitive. We will be revisiting the bridge concept and the possibility of getting that as part of a grant sometime in the future, but that's a long process, and I don't want to build an expectation for a short-term remedy there that doesn't exist. So that's essentially what I have on both Stiles and Hart and Town River Landing. Happy to answer a question on those before I.
Are there questions for the town manager? Yes, Councilor Moore.
Through you to the town manager. I think it was the last meeting, we had someone from the public speak about it, and they talked about the river itself having debris in there. And I was just wondering, as you're talking about cleanup, does it include the river, or is that a separate group?
That would be a separate issue. So river cleanup is actually a more technical process than I knew it was. But they do have training specifically for river brush, tree removal, and cleanup. And we've had a few people go through that training, volunteers go through that training. But as it pertains to, just sort of trash, I can certainly talk to Al. I don't think that was his immediate focus. They've done a really good job on the banks of the river, but in the actual riverbed, I don't know that they've put. Well, certainly in November, I don't know that you want to go into the riverbed, but I don't think that was their focus. But I will talk to them and see what their plans are and if they include that.
Mr. President, if I may.
Yes, Councilor.
I was with Al, and we looked at that, and the gentleman who was here, Brian, he pointed out several trees of good size that were actually at one point blocking the canoes from even going, and parts of those trees were cleared, just let a canoe by, but a lot of it is still right in the river itself. And I'm talking about good-sized trees, stuff that's like 2 feet across. And that's what they were trying to focus on, cleaning it, access to those canoes, making it safer and easier.
Yep. And we do have, we have a meeting coming up, Parks meeting, or at least a meeting that focuses on our parklands coming up in December. And it's just designed to get more volunteers involved and possibly offering trainings specific to river cleanups, brush cleanup, not the shopping cart piece, the brush and tree removals. So I will actually suggest that to the meeting planners. Get that going.
Thank you. Councilor Wood?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just a little concerned about the scheduling aspect of it, because too often we see things that should take weeks, take many, many months. So the conservation or the review that's going on now, is there a certain end date to that? And have you reached out to the Conservation Committee about at least putting a date on the record for meeting, assuming that date will be satisfied?
On the Stiles and Hart order conditions?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. We know our wetland delineation guy, whose name I forget, is planning on being done by the end of this month, and will give us the delineation, which then obviously goes to the Conservation Commission. So he is committed to having that done by the end of the month, and then Conservation Commission's regularly scheduled meeting is in December, so that's the date we're shooting for. Whether we can get a quorum of the Conservation Commission is probably the question. We haven't had an issue for a while.
So I would assume they're not fixed to, I mean, they have announced dates, but they could pick a different date.
They could.
As long as it's posted appropriately and
Oh, yeah.
everything, right?
Yep. And it is a priority for us because we know that that's literally the last thing the National Park Service is waiting for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item C, the update on the mobile station.
Mobile station. So as you know, the council's had a first reading of the order of taking some time ago, referred that to committee. I believe it was Rules and procedures or community and economic development? I think it's sitting in community and economic development, which is fine. I have filed an amended request with the Community Preservation, for Community Preservation Act funding, which should be voted by the Community Preservation Committee at the end of this month. I believe their meeting is on Wednesday the 30th. And the appropriation request, if all goes well, the appropriation request will then come to the council for first reading at your first December meeting. And we will bring the order of taking and the appropriation back for a vote at your second meeting in December. But to Councilor Wood's point, best laid plans don't always work out. A lot of moving pieces to this one. So worst case scenario, I would imagine the first meeting in January, no later than that for a vote. Once the property is recorded, the taking is recorded, then we are ready to hit the ground running to at least clean up that area prior to any sort of park construction work that goes on there. But we're ready to hit the ground running and as well complete the design work for the park components. So the council's goal has been to get it cleaned up and better join it, or at least join pieces of that property to the Flora Little Park. My goal is to see if we can repurpose the building, if it's not beyond tear down, if we can repurpose that building to provide some possibly low-key performance space, covered open air picnic space, exterior game tables, chess or checkers or table tennis along those lines, and then we'll, that'll obviously go through sort of a public design process similar to what we're going through with the senior center campus right now, which has gone fairly well. So I anticipate that process, but we can't really do that process until after the taking is complete. So that's sort of where we stand with that one. But
I thank
to answer
you.
questions.
Questions from the council? Yes, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the town manager. So obviously, when we started this process, we appropriated funds, I think it was like 200 plus thousand. I don't think anyone expected that to also cover the actual acquisition. We needed to do other things from there as well. Once the appraisal came in, just why was the CPC approached? Why didn't it come back to us with at least a discussion around additional appropriation to cover the acquisition?
So I went to the CPC with my original request, and the original request was essentially for the full taking. Because you're correct, when we came to the council looking for the 200,000 plus, that was designed to cover, potential environmental issues, environmental testing, survey, design work, all of the sort of I'll call them the ancillary costs associated with what we wanted to do with that piece of property. The CPC is very on board with the project and ready to appropriate money. Their concern was that there was what's referred to in the CPC world as supplantation. I don't think that this is a case of supplantation. That means taking money from the CPC that's already been appropriated through a budget process on the town level. But regardless, knowing that I just want to get this done, if we're going to do this, I want to get this done, I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to reduce our appropriation request, so we'll take the balance of what we've got, which is about almost 200,000 in the money that's already been appropriated. We're going to ask for the balance that's required, so call it another 300,000 from the CPA funds, and that's what's going to accomplish this piece of the overall project. I call this, part one. It's the taking. Then the CPC knows that we're going to come right back and we're going to say, we're going to ask for additional funding to cover things that we had originally anticipated would be covered out of the first appropriation. So I think the bottom line, and better just to get this done than to start to quibble about the legalities and the appropriation legalities involved. So we'll end up with the same amount of money essentially the same amount of money coming out of the CPC at the end of the day, and no additional funding coming out of the town's capital appropriation at the end of the day.
Right, which I understand, but I will beg to differ in regards to the approach, and this is what I'm going to say. This order of taking was initiated by the town council. We had appropriated funds. We also have the goal of acquiring the property, obviously repurposing it. I don't particularly understand in that process of the acquisition why you didn't come back to the town council, at least for a discussion, if we were going to cover the acquisition cost and leave the cleanup and the repurposing to the CPC. I think that is and I'm speaking for myself, not the council, that's a much cleaner transaction than going to CPC, having them go through their process, bringing up issues potentially, kind of delaying the whole thing to that end result. I'll say I'm a little disappointed that we weren't brought into that discussion. Now, the council may have decided to approach CPC for that as well. But I really think that in that process, you should have come to us first before you had gone. We may have allocated the funds for the taking, and you wouldn't have had to gone through that and also, let the CPC know that we're going to need additional funds down there. But I think the way you've done it there, keeping us out of that, I got to say I'm really disappointed in that, and I thought we'd be more involved. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Further questions on that topic? Seeing none. Update on the Old Scotland Links management agreement with projected revenues to the town.
So we have, I think as the council knows and the public knows, we've went out to bid on the management of the Old Scotland Links golf course. We accepted a proposal from Indigo Sports, or Indigo Sports, I think is what they're referred to. And we budgeted a certain amount of revenue within our budget, and I'm happy to report, that their golf revenues are good. We obviously structured an agreement where we've got we take a flat amount of 125, then we take a 20% share of revenues up to 975, and then 30% between 20% of the revenues over 975, then 30% of the revenues over 1,275,000. And so this is year-to-date as of about 3 weeks ago. We are at 320,000, a little over 320,000, which more than covers our expenses. So we will be looking at the final numbers for the golf season, not our fiscal year, but for the golf season, probably coming up end of November. So we're pleased with where we are. That doesn't account for any revenues for the spring up to June 30th, and so we're pretty pleased where we are at this point. So happy to answer questions about that one.
Yes, Councilor George.
Oh, thank you. Through you to the town manager. So with the revenues that are coming in from the golf course, and I don't remember this, I tried to look it up, but I don't remember. So will those revenues go into basically an enterprise account that will be specifically earmarked for the golf course on a go-forward basis? That's my first question. And the second question would be, at a particular point, if that fund just gets to a point where we don't foresee any extraordinary expenses, but we could use those funds in other places, would we be able to appropriate that on a go-forward basis?
First question last, yes. So if for some reason the segregated fund exceeded what we needed for the golf course capital, absolutely, the council can appropriate those as it wishes. Your first question, the receipts go into, if you recall, we did away with the enterprise fund and we created a receipts reserve for appropriation account. which is what we should be doing in this scenario, and that has worked well so far. So it goes into that account, could build up. We reserve some of it for capital needs for the course to make sure that we keep up with that, the things that the management firm is not responsible for. But over the next couple of years, we've got some obligations that, residual obligations from the town's management of that course, including some residual retirement retirement contributions we have to make to the Plymouth County Retirement Fund, just to clean up that. And then I believe we've got some other minor costs associated with the transition, residual health benefits, something along those lines, retiree health benefits, rather, along those lines. So we do have, and then obviously we've got the residual bond amounts that we did for the golf clubhouse. So once, over the next couple of years, once we work those down, then we're going to look at, rising income in that account, the receipts reserved for appropriation account. But that's available for the council to designate and appropriate as it.
Now, under the contract, is the management company required to submit, we'll say, a 3 or 5 year capital plan?
Yep.
So that we'll be able to see that and kind of see where we're at in regards to the foreseen expenses as well as some reserves for unforeseen. But like I said, at a particular point, the hope is that account gets maybe to a point where we can use that money for other capital expenses outside of the course.
Exactly.
Great,
Exactly.
thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Moore.
My question was answered.
Thank you very much. Councilor Perry.
Thank you, through to the town manager. Just in regards to Indigo itself, are you happy with the management of the golf course as far as the company goes, when it comes to, taking care of the course, employees, and just in general how they're running things?
Very pleased. So we've had no issues, very good lines of communication, so I can't complain about that at all.
Okay.
So it's been
Very
fine.
good. Yep, thank you.
All right, thank you. Further questions? And seeing none. The item E, middle school parking lot.
The middle school parking lot, so I think there's a little bit of confusion about the middle school parking lot, and I've heard little snippets of it here and there for the last few years. Just to sort of give you a scenario, the town leases properties to the district. The district maintains and cares for those properties, both on regular maintenance and also capital. Obviously, the council, I'm talking about the town-owned schools, not the regional high school. The district maintains and cares for the properties and any upgrades that are necessary, including capital. We know that we have to fund capital upgrades, and we've gone through this, I think, in the fairly recent past, with a sizable amount of money that the council appropriated. But we build, we have no paving crew. We don't have a town paving crew. We don't do that. We contract out all of our paving work. So any paving projects that the schools would need, and clearly this is one of them, would go on the district's capital plan. And I can tell you that this is on the district's capital plan, and therefore we've incorporated it into our capital plan. But once it's, once it's there, it goes through the district's, the district goes through its own prioritization process. They decide what projects they are going to tackle any given year. And then they send that to us and ask us to fund it, and we put an order in front of you. Last order was a bit confusing, I think, as everybody knows, so we're going to do it a little differently to make it much clearer in the future. But regardless, the funding comes from the council, but the prioritization and the decision to actually tackle a capital project comes from the district. And that's been pretty clear with other projects as we've seen in the past. All the ones I wrote down are bad examples, but it's they've all been they've all been sort of done the same way. We are always happy to offer any expertise, guidance to the district, and we often do. But in terms of the decision to actually fund a project, the district prioritizes. We then bring that appropriation request to the council. So,
Thank you,
Happy to-
Mr. Dutton. Counselor Wood.
Thank you. So the reason I brought this to your attention was because of the vote, was that only last week? That if a kid's getting off a bus, they step onto the curb. But if an elderly person is going after dark to vote at the high school, at the old high school, middle school gymnasium, they can't see the potholes that are sitting right there. And so it becomes a danger to anyone who's not a kid after dark, even during dark. And there's a lot of people in my family and also that have tripped and hurt their ankles on items just like that. So I know the policy is pretty straightforward. We lease a building to the district sets a capital plan and comes back and makes a request. But in this case, the town is using that facility at least twice a year, sometimes more, for a long period of time, at least a day, where people are put at jeopardy for simply walking into the building. And so I think the reason I brought this up is the email exchanges that I had showed that there was a lot of confusion about how to get this fixed. And the fix may be, I've got pictures, but the fix may be a simple 5-foot strip of asphalt, along a 30-foot span. So it's not huge. It's not like we're going to pave the whole parking lot. And, there were pavers on Mount Prospect just a couple weeks ago, so obviously the resources were there. But this may be a case of where the town needs to step up and address it with the school department and say, we're going to do this capital project for this building because the voters in our town need to have safe egress from the building, especially after dark, because they're not kids, they're not young adults, there's a lot of elderly and other folks involved here. And so that's why I brought it to your attention, because there seems to be, I understand the policy, but there needs to be better cooperation for this particular project. And it needs to be done. Obviously, we're moving into non-asphalt times, but it really needs to be done. It's been an issue for a couple years now. And that's my question.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Moore.
Yeah, I support the idea too. I also heard feedback on voting day about this. My question's a little different though, and it's more about the process of us approving capital and the guarantee that that capital gets used for the thing that we approved it for. And so I just want to make sure I understand that part of the process. If this does come in front of us and we approve the money for paving, is it then required that that money be used for that project? Or is there another decision process downstream that could potentially reallocate that to something else?
So I think there was a level of confusion when we voted, or when you voted, the last capital appropriation. I think it was for the track, correct? It ended up that the district, instead of using the appropriation, used either their E&D funds or CARES funding or ARPA. So they had another source of funding to do the track. They used it to do the track, and then they used the money, our appropriation, to fund their technology plan. So we have asked the district to return the money, and we've had discussions with them, to return the money that was voted specifically to fund the track, so that we can then ask you to reappropriate that to their technology plan. So I'm not saying that it wasn't a good use for the money at all, but I'm saying that we need to make sure that we are very clear about what we're funding and make sure that we fulfill our obligation to taxpayers so that they know that what we're voting at this level is being used at a different level. So we've learned a few things through this process. One is that instead of incorporating the capital request for the district into the town's capital appropriation for you to vote on, we're going to separate it out so that we vote the town and then we vote the district. And I think that's appropriate. I think that's going to be a lot cleaner anyway. But we've also learned the district actually doesn't necessarily need to tell us how exactly they're going to use the money. I mean, they have, and that's wonderful, but from a legal perspective, the district can simply say, we want to replace some boilers in all the schools, it's going to cost $1 million, here's the bill, and we're asking you to fund it. So when we fund that, what we should be doing is funding their capital request, not funding the very specific
Mr. President,
issues.
point of information to Mr. Rollins. Mr. Rollins, the discussion topic is middle school parking lot. We're going into capital appropriation. We're going into school committee appropriation. That wasn't on the agenda, so I think we need to end it.
We're going beyond the.
I think we need to end the discussion. If we want to have this, let's put it on an agenda so that everyone's aware of the conversation that's coming up. Thank you.
Very well. Are there further questions with respect to the middle school parking lot issue? Councilor Perry.
Thank you. From you to the town manager. So do we know at this point where the priority of this parking lot lies within the school committee? Are they contemplating doing it this coming spring, the following year? Just in general for that question. And number two, there is obviously, as Mr. Wood brought up, we have another election coming up there in January. So we don't want to put any more townspeople in jeopardy when it comes to coming to vote over there. Is there any short-term fixes that we could possibly do with some patching of the potholes at least? Because obviously in January and winter months there, it could create even more potholes at that time. So is there any potential action that we can take to ensure safety for January's election?
I will ask our roadway superintendent, Paul DeCosta, if there's something that we can do short-term. My guess is, assuming that asphalt plants have closed down, we could probably try to put some, what's referred to as cold patch down, just to fix the immediate problem. And I'm just looking on, I believe I saw that the parking lot for $250,000 on their FY23 plan.
So sometime next year.
So, yes, before the end of the fiscal year.
So ultimately, I certainly would, like to see some sort of short-term patch for this upcoming winter if possible, especially for the next election, and then hopefully we'll get a long-term solution done sometime in the spring. That's
Thank
all
you,
I have.
Councilor. Councilor Wood.
Yeah, just through you to the town attorney. With respect to the middle school parking lot, given that we are the leaseholder of the building, do we have the right to go and make repairs to the property based on safety concerns?
I think I'd have to look at the lease. Which I'm happy to do. I don't know if Michael can.
Yeah, because this other discussion really has me wondering about the capital process altogether.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to look at the lease, and then if you have specific questions that relate to the terms and conditions of the lease, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Councilor Souza.
It's not a question. Earlier this year, up by my house, there was some potholes and stuff that had to be repaired, and the highway department came up there with a piece of equipment, and I happened to talk to him that day. And what that thing did was, it took what we call cold patch, it heated it as if it was coming from the plant, and then they used that to patch it because they said it was a long-term patch, where if you put just a cold patch and packed it down, that's only considered short-term. But this piece of equipment that they had, I mean, do they still have it? Was it a short-term lease that they had on it? That's something, if they still have it, might be what we could look into get that done.
Yep, they still, I believe they still have that piece of equipment. I think that's something that we actually own, so.
I thank you. Further questions? And otherwise, we'll move on. I see that we're scheduled for a discussion this evening with respect to the capital improvement program. The first item of which is the upcoming debt exclusion for roads and infrastructure. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I put this on as a discussion mostly because I just wanted to give you an idea of what our thinking is internally in terms of road and infrastructure, and also Bristol Plymouth Technical School, which we need to start to plan, well, we have started to plan for, but we need to go for debt exclusion. On road and infrastructure, we've done a lot of work internally so far to identify capital funding needs for critical infrastructure, and when I say critical infrastructure, roads, sewer, and water mostly. We're developing a long-term capital plan, as I think I've mentioned before. It will come to you sometime after the beginning of the year, and it should, if we do it right, similar to the last one we presented, should include all the items that we foresee the town needing over the next 5 years. We do, for our own purposes, we do a 10-year, but for the council purposes, 5 years really gives you a much more detailed and more definite plan than sort of the 10-year. And we include on that capital plan everything from, buildings to roads, any infrastructure, schools, parks. Open space is actually infrastructure for us, so we include open space purchases or open space improvements as well on that capital plan. So to dovetail with the capital plan, I asked DPW and Finance to work on a written policy which encapsulates sort of our current practices for both road maintenance and capital appropriation recommendations. That draft is on your desk. We've still got a little bit of work to do, but I wanted to show you sort of some of the components of that and the criteria that we have been using and will continue to use. We have, as I say, a few more steps there, including more formally establishing the weighted criteria or the weighted ranking based on the criteria. But you can read that. If you have any suggestions or recommendations, please let me know. Anytime is fine. But I can tell you, according to the draft capital plan, as of today, we're facing a very steep cost to rebuild streets that we know need rebuilding. We've identified 4 main roads. I think I've mentioned them before: Flag Street, Cross Street, Vernon Street, and Main Street. I'm sorry, not Main Street, South Street, as needing rebuilding. And I think over the past 5, 6, 7 years, we've been sort of warning residents that we will be coming to them. We've tried to include it in all of our debt calculations that we put out for both the Mitchell School, for the fire station. We've added consistently a component about roads, and eventually we'll be asking residents to help offset the cost of capital upgrades to the roads. But I can tell you, before we ever go to voters looking for that, for additional funds for road reconstruction, we do have a lot of work to do. We know we have a lot of work to do to identify alternative funding sources for these projects, and some of the roads are potential TIP, eligible for TIP funding. Some are eligible for discretionary ARPA funding, and then finally, within the water and sewer capital plans, we've incorporated into the rate structures, certainly for water and coming up on sewer, a mechanism so that we can avoid some of the strict or some of the direct capital costs to taxpayers on road reconstruction. Just to give you a perspective, our preliminary estimates on 4 of those roads, the 4 that I mentioned, Flag, Cross, South Street, and Vernon Street, the total all-in cost on those is $44 million to reconstruct. That's, as I said, a hefty number, but I think if we do our job right, we'll reduce that number drastically between TIP funding, ARPA funding, and then just allocating costs across, within town, across the enterprise funds to the extent that we replace water mains, sewer mains, and so forth. So it sounds like it is a hefty number, but I think we've got work to do before we get it in front of you for a proposed debt exclusion, to whittle that number down, and ask the taxpayer for no more than we absolutely have to. So we are aiming for April on that one, and so we're working to that end, on road and water sewer line reconstruction. On the Bristol, so I'll open it up for discussion. I don't want to hog the discussion.
Thank you. Are there questions? Councilor Souza?
Yes. We keep talking about how bad our roads are and how we're going to be fixing them. What about our sidewalks? We have sidewalks in town. I don't want to say anything, but I know where there's one in particular where these trees were planted many years ago, and the roots have come out and just busted those sidewalks up horribly, where still to this day, people will be coming down with their stroller or something, with whatever you want to call it, with their babies in them. They will literally leave the sidewalk and go into the grass or the lawns to avoid the rise and fall in the asphalt. What are we doing in those cases?
Great question. We do, that 44 million does include, I'll remind the council that we are a complete streets community, so we've adopted a council policy that says when we redo a street, we are going to do as much as we can to either replace the sidewalk or create a sidewalk where one doesn't exist. And we're going to make it as bike-friendly as we possibly can with road markings and layout and so forth. So built into that 44 million is a reconstruction of sidewalks and the creation of bike sharrows or bike lanes so that we know that we're adhering to the complete streets policy. We have some alternative funding possibilities specific to sidewalks, along the lines of what we were able to do with Bridgewater State University. We're going to try to do another joint grant application with BSU in order to get just sidewalk reconstruction funded on Plymouth Street and then other parts of in town. So that is something that's on our radar. And when we, back up, and it's included, I think, in the policy, but when we did a complete scan, a complete scan of all the streets and sidewalks in Bridgewater, we made sure that we did sidewalks as well, because we wanted to know exactly what the condition of every piece of transportation infrastructure was. So we've got a good list of, or a good visual of sidewalks that are in okay condition, and then sidewalks that are just in deplorable condition. So we'll try to accommodate sidewalks where they're part of a road reconstruction project, they're built in, but we'll use the same process that I laid out in that policy to address other sidewalks that aren't necessarily part of a complete road reconstruction project. So it's on our radar.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. Councilor Perry?
Thank you. Again, through you to the town manager. Could you touch a little bit more in depth, just potentially on the infrastructure plan for those 4 roads? What exactly are we looking to improve upon, especially in those outlying roads like Cross, I should say? Just for the sake that, again, I want to have an idea of what's being replaced, because I hate seeing once a road is repaired, them digging it up again to fix something that they forgot to fix the first time. So can you let me know what exactly you're kind of planning for on that?
So glad you asked, because that is exactly why we wanted to make sure that we documented a policy that we could follow, so that when we analyze a road, we're looking at drainage, we're looking at water mains, and we're looking at sewer lines. Now, most Bridgewater roads don't have sewer lines, but most do have water mains and
Drainage.
most, I won't say most, but some of the more heavily traveled thoroughfares have what we refer to as formalized drainage. So something more than just a catch basin that, you know, collects water and leaches it out. So when we, and it's fleshed out a little bit better than I'm going to articulate, but when we look at a road, and you see the surface. Now, the surface might be in terrible shape, it might be in great shape, but when we look at a road, we look at what's underneath it, we look at the drainage, we look at the, you know, the strength of, or the continued effectiveness of the drainage. We look at water mains. We look at, you know, if water mains are ABS, asbestos pipe, we know that we want to replace those. If we look at the sewer line and the sewer line is old clay pipe, we know that we probably want to replace those. So we won't do just a road resurfacing, or we won't rebuild the top part of the road if we know that we've got drainage problems, we've got water main replacement, we've got a sewer line that needs to be replaced. So all of those sort of play into how we maintain and also how we determine what the capital needs are for a specific road. So the last thing, you know, the one thing that makes municipalities look really dumb is when you put down a really nice layer of pavement and then, you know, 3 weeks later, you've got the water department slicing something right down the middle to replace a water main. So we don't want to look like that.
And we're doing a similar plan like we did on Elm Street, I would imagine, yeah, how we dug that up and replaced
That's, yep, Elm Street's a good example of what a road reconstruction project is. And we did pretty well on the bidding for Elm Street. I think our total funds available or appropriation was $8 million. I think we came in at something around 7, if memory serves. So that gives you, and that was back a few years ago. So that gives you sort of a concept of what is involved in those kinds of road reconstructions. So,
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
yep.
Thank you. Councilor Moore.
Sure. So I was excited to see this and hear about this. I think, as I've mentioned before, roads are critical. Roads, water, public safety. But like those other critical items, I think this also has the potential for a lot of misunderstanding. If all of a sudden people are just told we're sort of buying roads and they're $44 million, and it's like, geez, you know, my cousin sort of could pave something for much less, right? So I would ask that as we're building the plan for this to share with us, I think we really also need to build a very strong communication plan for the community so that they can learn about what the project is, what the costs are, how we plan to maintain it, why we're making decisions for longer use instead of shorter use. All of that stuff, I think we have to just be better about communicating to the people who are voting about it. So that's an ask.
Thank you. Further questions? And seeing none. Upcoming debt exclusion, Bristol Plymouth.
I put this on just because I want to make sure that people know what's coming up, what to expect. I think everybody knows Bristol Plymouth was on the ballot, a number of months ago, in the early spring, late winter. And the question on the ballot was, essentially, I'll boil it right down, should Bristol Plymouth rebuild? Tear down the existing structure and rebuild? And the majority of the district, the 6 towns in the district, said yes, they should. So that was a go-ahead to do the building. What wasn't on the ballot was how to finance it. So the district, Bristol Plymouth Technical School District, will build the building, and it'll be a great building, I'm sure. They got a great team in place, but our debt associated with that, we have to figure out how to pay that. So in the 35, it'll be a 35-year bond, a level debt model, which gives us, after the first few years, first 4 or 5 years, gives us then a level amount to pay for the next roughly 25 years, and then it starts to decline a bit. But based on today's student population, we'd be at about $1.2 million per year. So that's based on each year, the capital debt gets reassessed based upon our student population. So today, based on our population, and I apologize, I don't remember exactly what our student population is at Bristol Plymouth, but today it would be $1.2 million. So obviously, we're not going to be able to absorb that within our existing levy without, pretty substantial staff layoffs. So we will be going out, and we've been very clear about this with certainly the public, we will be going out and asking for a debt exclusion to be able to fund that decision to build the new school, which Bridgewater heartily voted for. So Bridgewater actually, I think, was one of the most in favor towns. I think our yes votes were percentage-wise more than any other town, I believe. In any case, so I just wanted to throw that out there. We'll obviously be coming back to the council after the beginning of the year and giving you a debt exclusion language, but I do expect that one to be on the April ballot. If worst-case scenario, we would have to vote it in FY24. We'd like to get it just voted and done in FY23, but if worst-case scenario had to be pushed out to FY24, we could do that. But I just wanted to give you sort of that heads up and ask for any thoughts or discussion that the council might have.
Mr. Dutton, would we be planning to prepare a tax calculator for use of the general public in connection with that?
We would. We absolutely would. So to the extent that we put any of the road reconstruction on, we would do that as well. So we always like to make sure that people know exactly, well, as much as we know, exactly what they're going to pay for a project.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you to town manager. So I think this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, is that if the town does not approve a debt exclusion, that we are obligated to pay that debt. It'll get rolled into our operational budget and would have to figure out either how to absorb that with current revenues or start cutting expenses, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Yes, Counselor Perry.
Yes, thank you, through you to the town manager. So, and then I know you based, that number's based on our enrollment there. Does that fluctuate at all if our enrollment goes up or down as far as the amount levied to the town?
The amount, so if, for example, if we shrank to zero, the number of students that we had at Bristol Plymouth, then the debt would shrink to zero. And if we doubled our student population, then our $1.2 million would turn into $2.4 million.
So, an expansion of that, so our debt exclusion would cover that either way, whether our numbers went up or down.
Exactly.
Thank you, just wanted to clarify.
Yes, Counselor Wood.
Sorry, the first question is, I'm confused by that. So if we're to level fund it at 1.2 and the enrollment drops from Bridgewater, does that mean that the debt drops with it?
Correct. So level debt model is just a mechanism,
Yeah.
borrowing mechanism.
Yeah, I get it.
So I didn't mean to say that level debt would be exactly what we paid every year. So the $1.2 million, if we had fewer students, the $1.2 million would drop. So if we had more students, then it would increase.
Okay, so the real question I had was, for the town that voted no, and I can't remember, was it Raynham, Lakeville? I forget which.
that had a no on that.
Might
Are
have been
they
Rehoboth.
out? Are they out of the school? Are they out of the funding model? So we're paying more to cover their students. And if another town within the model decreases, but our numbers don't go up, the bond still has to be paid off. Does that mean our rates increase even though a town decreased their population? Because the bond itself is a bond and has a payback period with a rate and has to be paid. It's not based on tuition.
So if, first part of your question,
So for the town that voted no, are they out of the debt obligation?
they are not. So if you're part of the district and your town happened to vote no, regardless, you are still obligated to pay that debt. So it's a district-wide vote. It's not a town-by-town-by-town vote. So that's probably the best way to look at it. So the district voted to build this school, so therefore all the member towns are obligated to pay the debt.
Okay. And then the payment portion, the second question, you make it sound like it's a variable payment based on enrollment.
It is.
So if one of the 7 towns, their population drops in half, there's still a debt obligation for that year by the BP school district. So does that mean that per pupil for the rest of the towns, that their payment increases because one of the other member towns decreased?
So the school it is possible. I guess that's the best way. It's possible. So if our student population remained exactly the same, then we wouldn't necessarily see an increase because another school saw a decrease, because the population is capped at so many students. So presuming that they'll be fully matriculated, then a drop in one town will be made up by an increase in another town. But it is possible, if you're not fully matriculated, it is possible that a drop in one town would then have to be shared by Bridgewater, even though Bridgewater has the same level. So it's possible.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? And seeing none. Committee?
Mr. President,
Yes, Counselor.
for the December meeting, if I could ask, Mr. Dutton, and probably with our town clerk as well, like to have a discussion in regards to the January 7th election. If we have a snow emergency, which I don't think we've ever had to plan for, how does that work? So I think we need to keep people informed. This is potentially going to be a tricky one in regards to the weather. So I'd just like to have that, because I, saw this nice outlay of it as well. It doesn't have to be in here, but I think we need to let people know how that would work.
Very good.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I don't like January election.
Committee reports. Are there any committee members who would care to furnish a committee report? Yes, Counselor Wood.
Sure, to save time, I will cover the budget and finance. Tonight we met and we covered the orders 26, 28, 29, and 30. And that is the townhouse roof project, the BSU gift of $55,000, general fund transfer order, and the sewer enterprise fund. And on all of those, our committee vote was 2-0 in favor of recommending it.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Other committee reports? Seeing none. Legislation for action. Order FY 23-019, establish town goals. And I'd like to turn it over to Counselor Moore.
Sure. So if you remember, this came before us and was referred to strategic planning, and strategic planning was asked to populate the goals to bring back to the council for consideration. So we did that. I want to provide a little bit of context about the discussion and then the goals themselves. So rather than just sort of provide some goals, we talked about the goals in context of how they fit into the rest of the planning activities in the town. So we talked about the need for having goals that could be funded, so goals that influence the budget, an approved budget that we use then to take action, and then that action is monitored and reported on to review progress. And so the goals themselves, the strategic goals, are meant to be the first step of that cycle. And maybe if I could just sort of walk through some of these and just first talk about the format. We listed the goal. We talked about the responsible party, which was either the council, the town manager, or a supporting team member. And then we talked about evidence of success. And evidence of success means we get to the end of, in this case, FY24, we can look at that and say, yes, that happened. So thinking it wasn't enough just to say the goal, we wanted to talk about sort of how we would look at evidence to make sure that that goal was achieved. So the one that rose to the top, probably above all others, was the need for a downtown strategy. We didn't put in fix the downtown. So we put in the goal, we want to make sure that the first step is taken and the council agrees on what we should do and supports a strategy. So that was the first one. The second one was for the town manager to address the brown water concerns. We've been told that the new filtration plant should fix it, so the goal is, pursue that. But we also in the goal said, and measure that. So figure out some way to make sure that the impact actually happened. The next one is understand PFAS. Similar to the downtown revitalization, knowing that this could be a costly long-term approach or activity if we needed to undertake it, we wanted to make sure that the council understood the options available to us if we wanted to reduce this to full zero coming out of the well. And so the goal here is to really understand the options, which I believe is already sort of in flight. The next one, I want to spend just a few minutes on this. This is something different. So we started by looking at the master plan. And originally, we were going to start picking things out of the master plan to say, go do this and that. But we quickly realized that you can't do that unless the budget supports it. And so what we said is the preferred method here would be for the town administration, specifically community economic development, to look at the master plan and then work with the other members in the town to understand funding and ability to execute and come back to us with a suggestion on what we think could be tackled over the next 3 years with the available budget and the staff that we have. And so the idea is that we would create this once and it would be updated annually and communicated to everybody in the town who is helping to push things forward. So that's the strategic plan. And the hope is that while we certainly could influence the things that are prioritized, we wanted the town to actually do the planning. I'll go through the rest of them. The status updates from the town manager to the town council, we actually wanted this to be scheduled every 3 weeks. So we know that at least every 3 weeks on a specified date, there will be an update coming to the council that we can react to. The next one is we wanted to use that then to build an update that could go out to the community that actually comes from the town council. The president of the town council is the voice of the town council, so you'll see that it specifically calls that out. But the idea here is we set a goal to say every 3 weeks we will publish something on the website that is our communication on the important things that we're hearing about and are happening. The other few, I'll go through quickly, an annual committee training program. So recognizing that we create this strategic plan, we do all these communications, we wanted to have an event where we knew that the rest of the committees that need to be involved in executing against these plans hear about the plans at the same time and get trained on them. They can obviously still make their own decisions as committees, but we wanted to make sure they were all aware of what the strategic priorities are and how we were planning to accomplish that. And so we've asked for an annual training at the appropriate time where all committees hear about the town's plans and then also use that as a reminder on committee roles, open meeting laws, and then with the creation of the new DEI and B committee considerations there as well. Roadway improvement plan we talked about, data collection system. This I believe is also in flight, but we wanted to make sure that we're working towards some evidence-based decision process. So we can see the number of pothole reports that come in, we can see the number of reports that come in on water, and we can use that in our decision-making. So the request here is to prioritize the processes that get us that data. The fire station, and then the last one is the town landing, which we already talked about. So these are the recommendations of the Strategic Planning Committee. Would certainly appreciate additional feedback or thoughts on them.
Yes, Councilor George.
Great, thank you. So, first off, great job on this. So a couple things that jump out. One of them is a continuation of the discussion we had last meeting in regards to communication. One of the things that I would recommend within, and I was thinking about this, and I'm just throwing it out there for discussion, whatever the case may be, is we have to have an alternative to technology because we still have people out there that don't either have access to it or they don't want it. I was thinking maybe considering some of these to be posted in the library or something to that effect. I'm not going against it, but I'm just trying to cover all the bases. I know that we gravitate to Facebook and the web, but we still have a lot of people that don't access it. So it's just, you know, trying to cover as many bases as possible. I think even with that suggestion, you'll have people that will say, well, I can't get to the library. But anyway, we go from there as well. The other thing just in general is, and I don't know if I'd bring Mr. Dutton into this, maybe not, is some of these, the success, evidence of success, is it going to be specific, date specific, or does it stay this within there? Not all of them, but some of them, i.e., you know, I don't know, annual zoning review. You know, is it states, is it gonna be date specific, and things of that nature? That's, outside of that, everything else I really like. I just think, just in general, maybe some of these down the road, you need to be a little bit more in regards to a targeted goal. Some of these, I don't think you necessarily can have, but it's just feedback on that. I'm not trying to, you know, rip this apart. I think overall, it's good, it's clear, it's concise, so that would be probably more my feedback than anything else.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Moore?
Yep, that's great feedback. I love the idea about posting at the library. I think that came up in the discussion too, but we definitely need to find a way to improve communication outside of Facebook and the website. The date part is a great one. We did have some discussion about that. We are in the process of preparing a sort of a ride-along to this, which is an annual calendar. Not everything, but some of the items on here, we have selected dates. So I'm hoping that you see the connection when we present that back to the council. But certainly if you have feedback on dates or we want to bound some of these by dates, I think that's a great idea.
Great.
Thank you. Further comment from the councilors? I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion for approval? Very good. Is there a second? Councilor Souza? Second? Any discussion?
Just one quick question.
Yes.
If we approve this, this particular, nothing can change in this until after fiscal year 2024, correct? Am I right on that? For the remainder of fiscal '23 and all of fiscal '24. So this will stay baked until fiscal '25.
It's a great question. I actually maybe would redirect that to the council. So if we came up with a new goal next week, could we have another order that amends this order?
No, you would just have another order. You
Okay,
just do
that
it as a
overrides it?
You'd do it as a completely separate order. You wouldn't come back and amend it. You would just do it as a separate order.
Okay, we order that this no longer applies and
You could also theoretically, you could rescind portions of an order after the fact through a subsequent order. So there are ways we can handle that if need be.
Okay, yeah. That's just my own
If I
edification.
may, I partially agree with the town attorney. We follow Robert's rules, which means that once we pass this, you can come back and amend this if you want to.
Very good. Further,
I will listen to
questions?
the attorney.
all right, we have a motion for approval and a second. No further discussion? Could we have a, we'll do this by voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none? Thank you much. Moving on to Order FY 23-026, Transfer Order Townhouse Roof Project. If I may please defer to the town manager.
Sorry, Mr. President, this is a request for appropriation of funds from the Community Preservation account, specifically their historic bucket, so to speak. The attached the recommendation is for $82,500, and this covers many of the historic components of the replacement of the old town hall roof, also known as the townhouse, evidently.
Very good, I thank you. And I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion for approval and a second.
Second.
Second, thank you, sir. Further discussion? Seeing none?
I'll just
Yes.
add, because we discussed this in the committee, if someone adds all the numbers up, it looks like a pretty expensive roof, and you would never put this on your house. It's a historic roof, and we've already allocated money from the council. This is CPC money that's specific for this use. It has historic significance with historic architecture and other things other than just asphalt shingles. So if someone, outside is asking why does it cost so much, well, there's a breakdown in behind all these numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. We have a motion and a second. No further discussion? If we could have a roll call, a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. Thank you. Order FY 23-029, General Fund Transfer Order. If I may please briefly to the Town Manager.
Oops, sorry.
Did we miss one?
Did we miss 028, the acceptance of gift?
28.
Yes. BSU.
Yes. So the BSU has, over the last number of years, has been gracious enough to gift us $55,000. It's up from $51,000 several years ago, but $55,000, which is split between three of our departments: our police department, our fire department, and our roadways department. And so I would encourage the council to accept the gift.
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion?
I just want to
Yes.
thank BSU for, once again, providing this gift in support of the departments. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Counselor. If we could have, please, a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I see none. Thank you very much, and thank you to BSU. Order FY 23-029, General Fund Transfer Order. If you would kindly, Mr. Dutton.
Certainly, Mr. President. This one offsets some of the shortages that we're finding in in a couple of our operating budgets. And as I explained to Budget and Finance a little while ago, we normally, in years past, would wait till the end of the year and come to you and do a massive reconfiguration. And I think our finance director thought it would be better to tackle some of these mid-year. So this is the mid-year transfer. We are looking to fund some overtime in the fire department not due to anything other than injured firefighters who are out and a vacancy. And then in the recreational salaries, we're trying to realign what should be in the general fund versus what should be in the revolving account for Parks and Rec. So that's basically the request here.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion for approval and a second. Thank you. And further discussion.
Just for added, when we discussed this in Budget and Finance, one of the things that we asked was, in future orders and requests, if we can get a little bit better description in regards to what the expense line is specifically. So hopefully we'll see that on a go-forward basis.
All right. Thank you, Counselor. No further discussion. I would ask for a voice vote, please. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I see none. Thank you. Order FY 23-030, Transfer Order Sewer Enterprise Fund. Mr. Dutton, if you would, please.
Certainly, Mr. President. This transfers out of the sewer retained earnings line item into the sewer operating account line item, and it is the amount of $413,000 and change. And every year when we budget enterprise funds based on the charges that we anticipate for the coming year. We deferred, after the budget was completed, we decided to defer the sewer rate increase, which is coming, and I think the council, we've explained that. So this is to fund a shortfall in the sewer enterprise. Part of that funding will go towards to offset some of the long-term costs of the second phase of the sewer upgrade, specifically the engineering portion, and then other amounts go to fund sewer operating account. So essentially, that's what that is. I encourage you to pass it.
All right, thank you. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion for
Second.
approval and a second. Further discussion? Thank you. Seeing none, if we could have a voice vote, please. All those in favor kindly say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. Thank you. Ordinance FY 23-002, zoning ordinance amends section 11 definitions.
Bless you.
Bless you. I'll note for the councilors that this item had been referred to the Community and Economic Development Committee, which met last week in joint session together with the Town Planning Board, and at which meeting the Community and Economic Development Committee voted 2-0 to recommend approval. This definition change very simply would provide for an increase in the total amount of square footage available for an in-law living area from the current 600 square feet to 800 square feet. And that matter was also voted unanimously in favor by the Planning Board at last week's meeting. I would entertain a motion for approval.
Actually, make a motion to refer to advertising.
I'm sorry, for advertising, yes.
I'll
Thank you.
second that.
We have motion and a second. Thank you. Any further discussion? And seeing none, if we could have a voice vote, please. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We see none. Thank you. Moving on to ordinance FY 23-005, general ordinance, amend Article 2, Section 14, citizen comments. This is a matter I had brought forward relative to our administrative code, and the Rules and Procedures Committee did meet last week in connection with this matter. The members voted 2-0 to return it to the council with a favorable recommendation, but subject to further discussion this evening at the council level. And I actually would entertain consideration by the council of some proposed further edits. I would like to make a motion to amend what had been presented to the council at first reading. And I think that, Zoom's not working. Zoom's not, so we can't. Can't call it up. Okay. This could be difficult, but that's, I had made a number of suggested edits, but perhaps before we do, let me ask, because this was a matter of concern to Councilor Souza, and he raised the issue at the Rules and Procedures Committee as to how we might best communicate this, if in fact it is enacted by the council, how we would communicate this change to the public. And Councilor Souza, I'll be happy to turn it over to you.
Yes, we've kind of figured out how many people fit this category over a few years, and we figured that we can probably count it on one hand and have a finger or two left. So it's not a big issue, but what I think it might be was a bigger embarrassment to the council if someone didn't have knowledge of this because they couldn't find it or didn't know to look for it, and stood at that podium and we said, go fill out these forms and come back next time. Because basically that's what would happen. And, you know, so that's my thing. It's a good idea, but I just think it's may just create more of a problem in the future with what I've just explained. Because it's such a rarity in when it really happens.
It is a rare situation. We were certainly in agreement on that point. We did see it, however, very recently at back-to-back meetings in, I think it was in September. You'll recall that during some of our discussion with respect to the marijuana issue that was brought forward to appear on the ballot in January, a member of the public who was not a resident of Bridgewater came forward to express concerns, and he is a physician. And the council did, in fact, grant by vote, did grant to that individual the opportunity to address the council, notwithstanding his non-resident status. And I thought that that was actually very helpful. I thought that he had very significant comments, very useful comments for consideration by the council. And so I was happy to see that take place that way. Then, just a matter of 2 weeks later, at our next meeting, we were entertaining the matter of the indigenous celebration of Indigenous Peoples' Day. And we had a similar situation where a non-resident stepped forward, once again, made very germane comments and was eminently qualified to do so. I realized only later after the meeting that that individual, what happened to be Professor Anderson from Bridgewater State University, was absolutely eminently qualified to present a discussion on that matter. And I wasn't really fully, personally, I wasn't aware of her credentials prior to that. But nonetheless, I was very happy that we were able to extend to her the ability to speak before the council, notwithstanding her non-resident status. So I think it's something helpful for us to do. My only concern with it is that, if you think about it, in the course of less than a minute, some member of the public will step forward to the podium to address us, and they'll indicate to us, because they're required to provide their address, that they're not a resident of the town. So with no forewarning at all, we're presented with the need to consider a vote to suspend the rules to allow that person to speak. That's just what we've done in the past. My proposal doesn't change that requirement. We would still need to have a vote to consider, listening to that individual's comments of a non-resident. What I have put in place is what I think is an ability for us on the council to have a little bit of advance word as to who, as a non-resident, is planning to come forward and address us on what matter, and what town resident, is in effect inviting that person to come and speak before us. I think we have to bear in mind one thing, and that is that this is a case of a non-resident of the town coming forward before the council to influence our legislation, to influence our decision as to legislation before the council. I'm not saying it's inappropriate, but I think we have to weigh that. I think what's very important is to know who the individual is. So I think we should be relying on something more than someone standing at our podium and introducing themselves as John Smith without even knowing perhaps what town they're from, or certainly not their address. They make their comments. That's all well and good. Hopefully they're not going to do anything that's going to cause a disparagement to arise, but they're going to make their comments. We will weigh that, and we will take our vote and proceed with the legislation before us. But what I had planned to do in this measure was to originally provide for a 24-hour period during which we would have advance notice of who that person is. And I did receive comments, I know I did from Councilor Perry, and from last meeting, from Councilor Gallagher, with respect to that time period. And I think there was a sense that it might be an onerous burden, because someone wouldn't necessarily know they would be planning to come before the council until much closer to the council date, maybe on the council date itself. One of the amendments I would propose is I'm actually going to ask you to consider reducing that 24-hour period I'd specified to a 6-hour period. In other words, on the very day of the meeting, no later than 1 p.m., let's say based on a 7 p.m. meeting, the individual would need to provide what I've provided here, the written notice by email to the town council clerk requesting the ability to address the council. And I think I think it serves the purpose of providing to us some advance notice, yet it doesn't impose an undue burden on the non-resident. I'm hopeful you'll consider that as a more appropriate method to get that information.
So I'll make a motion to approve the main motion so we can get to the amendment discussion.
I'd like to still have discussion,
That's,
even
all right.
before we go,
All right.
before we
Well-
go there.
All right, so you'll second for discussion, is that the case?
No. No, I
Are
don't
we,
really want
are
to
we
move.
then debating the object in front of us?
Yes.
I would call that out of order.
Mr. Rollins?
Are you guys still in?
We're still in discussion.
Yeah, well, you can continue.
Well, I mean,
There's
he
no
he can
motion
put
on
it
the
out
table.
there and vote it. I'm just saying,
No one's
I'm
made
not
a
gonna
motion.
support
No
it.
one's made a motion.
Oh, well, there's gotta be a motion to approve and then discussion,
All right,
formal course.
so, second for discussion?
I'll second for
I
discussion.
don't think we have.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, all right. Thank you, Counselor.
Now I'll make a motion to amend as you have indicated.
Well, thank you.
discussion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend. The amendment, that is substantially the amendment that I think you can tell by the copy presented before you would actually take place. I had made other minor edits that you can see in red line on the copy before you, primarily based on comments I'd received from the council previously. For example, from Councilor George, prior, in fact, to my introduction of this matter to the council, he had suggested to me that I make a carve-out for business owners. So we're not requiring exactly as stringent a requirement on business owners who are non-residents of the town. And at the last discussion for this matter, Councilor Perry had urged that I include property owners who are not residents of the town. And I'm very happy to make those two carve-outs. I think they're very appropriate, and I think it'll serve the interests of those stakeholders well. And substantially, those are the edits I had proposed, as you see before you, to the original body of the proposed amendment to the ordinance. Is there further discussion?
Yes,
All right, Councilor Wood.
thank you. I will be in favor of the amendment and the main motion as well. I think that the predicament that we put ourselves in if we don't have these rules are that once we suspend the rules about who can speak in front of us, there could be a stream of 15 people from out of town. And because we suspend our rules not for one person, but for the entire agenda item. And so I supported the idea that if it is a non-resident, even no matter what the subject expert is, that they should at least give us some forewarning as to what would be discussed in front of us, just so that we know ahead of time. Otherwise, we're making a knee-jerk reaction to try to decide on the spot, are we going to let them or not let them? Secondly, there are a lot of governments in this form where they encourage people to come up and comment, but they keep a register of people ahead of time, and you have to be registered to speak ahead of time before you get a chance to speak. And we don't have anything like that, and this doesn't encourage that. But where a non-resident would want to speak, I think it helps balance out the system of residents versus non-residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Yes, Councilor Perry.
Thank you. Just to address, I think, what Councilor Souza was saying earlier, my concern is for those that do, out-of-town people or business owners or property owners that do want to speak, where are they going to find this information? Do we need to put this attached to each agenda that we have for the town council?
No.
Or is there going to be a special place on the website that, we can get this information out on? I'm just concerned that we're going to get a lot of people saying, I didn't know that this was in place. I have to come back to the next meeting now and plan to do that. So that's my concern.
I think that's a valid issue, and that's something that Councilor Souza brought forward in committee. I did put before you tonight a copy of the Bridgewater Town Council frequently asked questions. This appears on our website. It actually may have been today, or it may very soon be removed. If you look at this very closely, you'll notice there are any number of outdated provisions here. For example, one refers to the fact that the town council meets at the offices, at the studios of BTV. Well, it's been a long time since that's happened, and that gives you some impression of how old this is. But until today, or maybe until tomorrow, if it's going to be removed at that time, as I had suggested to the town manager, this was available on the town website by just entering the term town council it would be the first item that comes up in response to that search query. So it is very readily available. My suggestion, and the reason that I have asked that this be removed, is for revision, because obviously our recent charter changes are not reflected here. There are some other inconsistent or just erroneous information because this document is so old. I think it's the perfect opportunity to add a frequently asked question, you know, how can I address the council? Or more specifically, can a non-resident address the council? And we can give very precise information based upon this proposed ordinance as to how that would take place. I think that would be the best way. I would just add one comment as a personal matter. I did express this to Councilor Souza at the committee level. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. I think we've all heard, right? I mean, the point is, if you're coming before a body, a town body, a municipal body such as this, or if you were appearing before the town planning board or the conservation commission, any body of town government, you must be familiar with what their requirements are, not just as to addressing them, but what regulations are in effect, or, you know, just how that body operates. You know, what would be your ability to address them and to request something of them or submit testimony before them. So ignorance of the law is no excuse. We can't restrict ourselves from doing what has to be done just because we're hung up on the question of communication. Communication is absolutely essential, but I've given you what I think is one of the easiest ways. It's an already existing method that we simply have to update, and I think that's where the answer should be posted.
And just to follow up on that, Mr. President, so I would agree. I mean, I think the update of that and putting that information on there would be an excellent first step. The only thing I might suggest as well going forward, potentially, at least on a short term, to introduce this to people, is going forward on the meeting agendas that we have under citizens open forum and/or citizens comments at the end, a little blurb under that item stating that, please be aware, out-of-town residents, please give us 6 hours notice of your intent to speak in front of the council. Again, just so there's no confusion, because most cases, people coming to our meeting will look at the agenda in advance. So I think if they see that on the agenda, at least for some upcoming meetings.
I personally think that's a good suggestion. I'd certainly be happy to follow through on that.
So in order to keep, transparency of what we're trying to do here, and again, I see the value of what we're trying to do here, I think that just kind of would cover us in that regard. So we want, upset any people coming in that do want to speak and infringe on any rights to speak in front of us as well.
Well, that's right. And in fact, I in no manner wanted to restrict anyone's ability, including the ability of a non-resident to appear before us. Councilor Wood?
No, I was just going to add the idea, you can actually, if you're updating the document, just put the link right in the agenda,
Okay,
you know?
that's perfect. Yeah. Councilor Moore?
Two things. I like the idea of the agenda. I think a lot of people who come before us probably aren't frequent flyers, and if we put right in there, resident comments are 3 minutes and non-residents should register, I think that's a great idea. The other thing, I'm also supporting it. I think it's much better than what we have. But one of the questions I did have as I looked through it is, what criteria do we use to say that someone is worthy or not worthy? And I worry that it can become a filter for hard conversations. And so over time, if we do, kind of see challenges in that area, it might be good in the future to amend this to say, the appropriate things to come before us are, some sort of guidelines on, you're offering expertise in the area, you're talking about X, Y, Z.
I was reluctant to actually do anything that would suggest that we were attempting to not just restrict, but to limit the ability. In other words, if we're allowing a person to speak, it's just that vote of approval that we would be taking that would allow the person to speak. So I didn't want to get into anything more particular that might be interpreted as a method to kind of restrict someone's speech. So what I did, though, in fact, at the very end of the proposed ordinance, all other provisions of this section 14 shall be applicable to non-residents. That's where we talk about, in the existing ordinance, the limitation to 3 minutes. I'm quite sure that's there. If it's not, then we should put it there. But it refers to maintaining decorum and, the ability of the council to vote in favor of allowing this person to speak. I really wanted to give largely an open door to a non-resident, and I didn't want to really provide any kind of filter, I think as you referred to it, such that, we might be considered to be attempting to restrict certain topics or certain people. So,
Yeah, makes sense. I think that was,
yes, Councilor George.
Thank you. I do support business owners, real property owners actually being able to speak during citizens' open forum and citizens' comments. I don't support them having to submit prior to our meeting to speak. The reason for that is, obviously property owners pay taxes. Believe it or not, people that lease pay taxes unless they have a great landlord. So a lot of the decisions that we make financially, as well as other things, I think have direct impact to them. So I would quantify them as a citizen. I do not support setting non-residents, allowing them, even with submitting what needs to be submitted in open forum or in citizens' comments. I would support allowing them maybe to submit in order to be able to speak during discussions for 2 reasons. One, it's not putting any restrictions on public comment. And the other thing is it would give us the opportunity not only to know who's coming to maybe to have an interaction, if they're going to, come to us as a resident expert. I would love to have discussions for clarification and things of that nature. I'm still dead set against non-residents speaking in either part. My record has shown that every time we've had someone come up, other than a business owner, I voted against it. I'm going to stay that way.
All right, thank you, Councilor. Is there further discussion? Seeing none?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Yes, Councilor Perry.
To an extent on that, I kind of agree with what Councilor George is stating regarding, this was my original concern when this was originally brought up regarding business owners and property owners. I understand, them being out of town and, having you follow what they're saying is in number 1, which is your 6-hour time limit. But I tend to agree with Councilor George that, again, they are taxpayers within the town if they do own property or do have a business. And I think that should come with some sort of almost equal standing as far as residency goes in order to speak regarding their particular property or business.
There are distinctions we draw between citizens, residents, and others. Citizens can vote. You can own every piece of property on Main Street, and if you're not a resident of the town, you don't get to vote in the town. So we do make distinctions as to what are the rights of residents versus non-residents, who nonetheless are stakeholders. Business owners and property owners are stakeholders. That's why I was not requiring them, for example, to identify a resident of the town who shall be deemed to have invited them here to speak. They have a presence here, we know them. I did intend to also hold them to the, in now 6-hour, according to my amendment as proposed, the 6-hour advance notice. I just think it's helpful for us to have a good sense coming into the meeting in the evening, during the day, having an opportunity to have received from the town council clerk this request, seeing that John Smith, the owner of ABC Design, is going to appear before us tonight to talk about potholes. I think it's helpful for us to know, and I don't think it's an imposition of a great burden on a property owner or business owner in the town, personally.
Just to expound upon that and discuss this with you is, again, the business owner or the property owner is paying taxes. Your typical resident obviously owns a property, they're paying taxes in the town, they're having the right to speak. So I, again, very similarly think that the same situation is being applied to these particular people. So again, at this part of your proposal, I would not agree with that, they should fall under the 6-hour time frame. So based on that, I would say I would like to make a motion and edit just to allow business owners and real property owners to not have to follow paragraph 1, and they should be considered the same as members of the town.
Can I just expand on that? So would you agree that within the business owners and real property owners, after fifth line, be permitted to address the town council and strike out everything after that? I'm asking Dr. Perry.
Right.
Just for clarification, so I know what you're saying, just to make it clearer that you're looking at it to delete that paragraph
I
1.
would say, yeah, so I just say that shall be permitted to address the town council and strike probably, following during such periods upon compliance with paragraph number there 1, strike everything afterward. Of such business shall be permitted to address the town council. I just would add, without notice and be, granted the same rights as a town resident to speak in front of the town council.
But striking everything after town council would accomplish the same thing, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, either way.
So
Keep it simple.
yeah, I would support that, so I'd vote yes. I mean, second, excuse me, second.
I don't understand the amendment. I couldn't follow the entire description. Can you?
So, forgive me?
If you like to describe it better than I, Mr. George, go right ahead.
Yeah, so, in
We're the same-
essence,
I think we're thinking the
and,
same thing.
yeah, Attorney Rollins, keep me honest here, because I lie by accident. By striking out all of the words after town council, so making it period right there, what it would do is it would allow.
Sorry, which town council? Where?
Under the section heading business owners and real property
On
owners.
the back page.
On the back page.
of the page.
So if you look down, 1, 2, 3, the fourth line down, after town council, do you see that? To strike out all
Starting
of
with
the
during.
words after during. Make it just so that property owners, leasehold owners could speak to the town council.
Shall be permitted to address
Yeah,
the town council, period.
So we wouldn't have to waive the rules like we normally do.
Which would make them on par with a town resident.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
It's a new
Or
motion.
discuss,
this
further
is-
discussion.
That's the motion I'm speaking about, yes.
Yes.
So on this
This is a
proposed,
second motion to amend.
A third,
Right,
second.
correct. So we're speaking on this second motion to amend.
Right.
okay.
So now we're discussing that because there was a first and a second, correct?
Correct, for discussion.
Okay. So by making that change, you're effectively diluting the rule that we currently have, which is if someone is a non-resident, they have to seek permission from the council before they can address the council. So by making that change, you are now enabling anybody who owns a business or is a representative of an owner of business or a leaseholder or whatever to address the council regardless of their residency.
I don't think I don't think we said
Without a vote.
representative. I think it's.
I
either-
didn't, yeah,
yeah,
we're
we-
talking
it's
about the
it's
direct
either
property
it's either
owner.
property owner or the leaseholder.
Yeah, it
There's
says,
no
or
representative.
designated employee or officer or legal representative of the business.
All right, so
I
representative,
understand, okay. I
property
understand what you're saying.
So by
Okay.
changing that, you dilute the rule
but it could be
that
a
is currently in
designated,
place.
as I have stated, a designated employee, right? You could have someone, a manager of a store.
business.
Right.
Correct, we've had
okay.
that before.
So he's a designated employee or an officer, if it happens to be a corporation LLC, right? Are you saying you don't want or legal representative?
No, personally, I'd say no. It has to be either the owner or the business, the building owner, the landlord, or the owner of the business. Either one. Now, to, Council Woods, I don't want attorneys streaming in here saying I'm representing things of that nature, or a manager. It would have to be the owner.
Yeah.
Well, the owner may not even be available, but he instructs his manager, who's on site in town every day.
We don't allow residents to come up and speak on behalf of another resident. They have to speak on behalf of their own self. So if, to your point, if you can't make it, you can't speak.
Right. I kind of follow that thinking, and I would be willing to amend the motion to include striking, or a designated employee or officer or legal representative of such business or property owner or lessee as well, just to make sure that reads that it's the owner of record of a business, real property, or leasehold interest in real property.
Or the lessee, okay. Okay, so that's the motion before us. Yes,
And
Counselor?
well, I would get a second on that amendment.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Okay. The Counselor?
Yeah, so I guess just maybe a concern for discussion. So
Sure.
when we've seen some business owners come before us, it's because there's some big project or some other thing that we're asking them to talk to us about. And we create a discussion topic for them that we prepare for. We sort of know what's being presented. We can sort of manage that to make sure that it's within the boundaries of what we're talking about. I do worry about an external stakeholder having open access to an open meeting in the town to kind of maybe share their perspective with no rules, right? Let's say that there is, and I appreciate the business owners in town, and I think we've had great experiences. Let's flip the script and assume that there's a business owner in town that's trying to do something that we don't like. Every meeting, they have 3 minutes, they can come up and say whatever they want, promote that. I worry about that, and I have to imagine that's the reason that originally it wasn't included. I don't know if people know the history there, but for me, I would rather have, if a non-resident wants to share something about the community, I think we run that through the discussion forum and the other channels that we use today. But
Counselor Perry?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think, as was stated earlier, I think we've had a handful of situations where we've had this whole situation come up with outside people from the town. I would imagine at this point in time, if it was a business holder or a property owner, they're coming to discuss something relative to their property, relative to their business. I don't think they're picking some willy-nilly type of topic to come out and speak on. I don't think they're going to waste their time. So I think, again, I just feel like if they're a tax-paying, property owner, a tax-paying business owner, I think they should, have the ability to come in and speak without notice if it's, because they are basically members of our community, whether they live outside of our community or not. They are part of our community because they own property, they own a business, and they are, part of our community. So I think they should get the same respect as a resident in similar vein to be able to speak as a result of that.
All right, thank you. Counselor Moore?
yeah, so, and I appreciate the discussion. I think part of this is me sort of learning about this, but I do differentiate between a resident, someone who walks the streets, lives here, experiences all of our services, and somebody who owns property here, but potentially lives in Florida and has never been in our community, right? And I do think our job and the people who elect us are different potentially than the people who own property, to the earlier point. And so at least for me, I see open forum as a way for the people who have elected us and are asking us to protect their interests, for them to come up and share that with the full group that's voting. And so I do, at least for me, I appreciate, but differentiate property owners from residents.
Just to follow up, Mr. President? Again, and I understand it, but I don't see a property owner who's in Florida or outside of the state coming unless it's specifically dealing with a particular property or business. Again, I think it's, those business owners, they might live in the next town over or 2 businesses over. If they work in our community, they're here in our community more so than they might be in their own community as far as where they live. So I do think they do have a strong standing within our community, and again, should have that ability to speak as a part of our community. That's
Okay,
my final statement on the subject.
Thank you. I would make a motion to move the vote. And what is before us then is the proposed amendment to, to the amendment as amended,
I think you have that straight.
which would delete the language that's proposed before you following the word town council. So for clarity, that section would read, notwithstanding the foregoing, the owner of record of a business, real property, or leasehold interest in real property located within the town who is a non-resident of the town, or,
Nope.
and we're striking.
Striking that, and
Striking
the
the
parentheses,
parenthetical, that's right.
shall be permitted to address the town.
Shall be
council,
permitted to address the town council.
Period.
Period. Okay, so that is the motion before us, and I would ask for a voice vote in favor of that motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Nay. Okay, and so there are
I
three
think we're gonna have
opposed.
to get a hand vote on that, Mr.
I
President.
think we need, I would like to call for a roll call vote.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Chase?
No.
Mr. Wood?
No.
And Mr. Rushton?
Yes.
Very good.
4 yes, 3 no.
Thank you very much. So we have that revision taken care of. So the motion before us is to adopt the the amendment to the ordinance as amended, which is before you, subject to what we have just struck. All right, so I would entertain a motion.
No, we have a motion.
We had a motion, we got to vote on
had a
the.
motion.
the
I'm
amendment.
sorry.
We can have more discussion if you want.
No, just vote on it.
So we can move right to a vote.
One point of discussion now that we have an amendment and this has changed before us. So who's going to qualify that someone actually owns a business when they stand up and talk to the microphone?
Same process we use when someone stands up and says they live where they live.
In other words, we take them at their word.
Yes.
Okay. And, you know, that's a little less clear when we're talking about a business owner or a property owner. That's why the 6-hour notice would be something beneficial in that respect, I think. But for the moment, we've dispensed with that for business owners and property owners. That does not apply. So if we can move ahead with a vote on the amendment as it appears before you, subject to what we've already just struck, I would entertain a motion for approval. Oh, I'm sorry, we have a motion.
Yeah, we're going
Back at
for a
the
vote
top.
on all the amendments.
I would ask for,
Beginning.
let's not do it again. I would ask for a vote in favor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And seeing none.
So that's
That-
on
that
your
was on the
amendments.
amendment.
So for the amendment.
Correct,
Now we're at the main motion.
correct.
Now for the main motion.
Approval of the ordinance itself.
I'm sorry?
Approval of the ordinance as amended.
That approval to be, yes, and to be sent for advertising.
Correct.
Okay, yes. Do we have further discussion?
I just want to make a comment.
Councilor Moore.
I support all the ideas, but for me, I can't support it as amended, because I truly don't believe that a business owner can come up here and talk about the schools and talk about the roads and talk about all the things that matter to the community. So I appreciate the sentiment. I recognize that, you know, others may not agree, but just wanted to state that before I vote.
All right, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Wood?
I'll be in support of this simply because I know at any given time that someone stands at the microphone, we can suspend our rules and allow that person to speak.
Ultimately, I agree, that's true. All right, then, if there is no further discussion, then on the amendment itself, I would ask for a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, one opposed. Thank you. Moving on. Order FY 23-031, prior fiscal year bill. Mr. Dutton, if you would, please. Thank you very much.
Motion to send to Budget and Finance Committees?
We have a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion? And seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one? Thank you. Order FY 23-032, Veteran Tax Benefits, proposed by Councilor Moore and Councilor Wood. Would either of you care to provide an introduction?
I just mentioned Councilor Wood and I, are both support this. I think Mr. Pitta gave a great overview.
Mr. President, before we go any further, I am a veteran. I probably should have recused myself in some discussion and vote.
You'd like to
in the
recuse yourself?
I'll go to the
All
corner.
right,
Go to the corner.
very good.
I can't believe he did it. That's the funniest. Thanks, Frank. Make a motion, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I would appreciate support. I think, as we heard, this is sort of a loophole that I think impacts people negatively at the time when they most need it. So I would love for us to be able to support this.
Mr. Wood?
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you. We heard what Mr. Pitta said, and, the regulations and why they're there. And I like the idea that, Finance Committee and Budget and Finance will look into the size of this issue, but I suspect it's probably pretty small in the nature of things, so, yeah, let's move it to Budget and Finance
Second.
Committee.
Thank you, councilors. I would entertain a motion then for approval.
No, we already.
Refer to-
Refer to Budget and Finance Committee.
Refer to Budget and Finance and Finance Committees.
Correct.
Yep,
All
and
right.
I seconded it.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing no one, thank
All
you.
right, come on back in, Frank.
All right,
Call the corner.
back at full strength. Resolution, FY 23-002, naming of the Old Scotland Links Golf Course Clubhouse. And I would, Councilors Rushton and Moore are the sponsors. Would either of you care to introduce this measure?
Maybe if I could.
Councilor Moore?
That's okay. I will try to do this justice. So I think every once in a while, someone very special sort of comes along, I think that exemplifies the best of Bridgewater and leaves a positive path behind them of impact and smiles as they move around our community. And I think, our community recently lost one such person, and the impact was immediately seen on every sign in Bridgewater, and I think on the faces of everyone that knew him. So to recognize his immeasurable contributions to our community, we're proposing that we permanently name the golf course clubhouse after Charlie. And if I could, I'd actually like to read the full order. I know it's late, but I think this warrants it. So whereas, so this is Resolution R FY 23-002, whereas Charlie Simons, a longtime superintendent of Bridgewater's Park and Recreation Department and beloved colleague of hundreds of fellow employees, died peacefully on October 26, 2022, in Myrtle Beach with his wife and 6 children by his side. Whereas Charlie was born in Boston and grew up in Bridgewater, where he and his wife raised 6 children. Whereas from an early age, he showed athletic prowess, and with his height of over 6'7", he accomplished great feats on the basketball court. Whereas he was a 1973 graduate of Cardinal Spellman High School and a 1977 graduate of Stonehill College, where he was a 1,000-point scorer. Whereas Charlie was inducted into both the Cardinal Spellman and Stonehill College Hall of Fame. Whereas Charlie earned a degree in business from Stonehill College. And whereas the strong values he instilled as a coach to hundreds of others' children shaped generations of Bridgewater's residents. Whereas as a coach, he was always stern, fair, and patient, but always reminded children and their parents that sports are meant to be fun. Whereas Charlie could always be found lending a helping hand to his family, friends, or even strangers, Charlie enjoyed helping others and never took credit for success, but always volunteered to fix problems. Whereas Charlie's career with the town of Bridgewater was extensive. He retired earlier this year as Superintendent of Parks and Recreation after spending 26 years serving the Bridgewater community. From preparing the top-notch baseball, softball, and football fields at Legion Field, to building the Old Scotland Links Clubhouse, to building the pickleball courts, to building Music Alley, to building softball fields, to building basketball courts, he was known for his unwavering dedication, commitment, leadership, and hard work. Whereas Charlie was a doer, accomplishing more in his lifetime than could ever be listed, but his greatest contribution and his greatest pride was his family. Whereas Charlie's many friends and colleagues honored him upon his retirement by affixing his name to the old Scotland Links clubhouse, an act the town council now desires to make permanent. Whereas the Bridgewater Town Council recognizes that Charlie was a committed and dedicated professional who directly and positively impacted the lives of generations of Bridgewater residents, it is therefore resolved that with the unanimous support of the Bridgewater Town Council, the clubhouse at the Old Scotland Links Golf Course herein shall be known as the Charles L. Simons Clubhouse at Old Scotland Links.
Thank you very much, Counselor. That was well said. The proponents have requested this be treated as an emergency measure, and as such, the council must first consider and vote on acceptance of that emergency preamble. And so we would need a roll call vote, please, first, just on the emergency preamble. I would ask that all those, I'm sorry, if we could have a roll call vote on that matter.
Need a motion first.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. I thank you.
Can I ask a question through you
Yes.
to the attorney? Not that I disagree with that, but is this in the proper form for an emergency item?
Can you vote it as an emergency?
Can we?
I mean, I'll leave that up to you to decide if it's an emergency or not.
All right.
That's not really a legal question, I don't think.
It is in
It's-
my
it-
mind.
It's an open meeting law question.
Yeah, I mean,
Want to get it done.
if it were me, I would say that keep it at the council level and vote it at the next meeting, just because of open meeting law. I think it's a minor issue. I think it's nominal. I'm not sure the nature of the emergency, and when you do it by emergency preamble, not that I disagree with any of this, but when you do it by emergency preamble, you have to state what the emergency is, and you want to be very careful about that, because it essentially is veering from our rules and sets precedent on what is an emergency and what isn't. But this is a hard one for me to say no to. It's a resolution, but if you want to be very strict, as Mr. Wood is asking me, legally speaking, I don't believe it to be an emergency. Based on what I see here, I don't see a preamble that would indicate that. So my best advice, if the open meeting law is an issue, I would say keep it at the council level and vote it at the next meeting, hard as that is to say, based on what the context of this resolution is.
Would the counselors who are proponents of this consider
Point of
withdrawing
information.
the
Point of
request?
information. So if we all feel that this is an emergency, this would be a vote against the emergency preamble, correct?
No, if you all believe that it's an emergency, you should have had an emergency preamble placed on this order that says, this is an emergency for the following reasons. And then step one, as that emergency process, is to say, we're now voting first on that this is an emergency because of the following things that were written into that order. And then step two goes to the vote.
Yep.
Right, so that you would probably have to amend this, make a motion to amend, make clear what the actual emergency is. That is your emergency preamble. You then vote your emergency preamble. That would be,
That wasn't the question I'm asking, but I'm following what you're saying.
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I'm saying if we don't deem it as an emergency, say, we have to have 2/3 required. If we vote no, then can we make a motion to bring it to the next council
Oh,
meeting?
of course.
Yeah.
Well, you don't even have to.
I just want to follow it the right way,
You
because
don't
now,
have to, you could withdraw the vote to vote this as an emergency and just simply say, we'll make a motion to keep this at the
Right,
council level
'cause-
for the next meeting. You could do it that easily,
I-
yeah.
personally, this is a no-brainer. Let's just keep it clean. I would make a motion to hold this until our next scheduled meeting.
I'll second that.
Very good.
And again, for the record, this is just procedural. This has nothing to do with the merit of the order.
Whoever made the initial motion, I'm not sure who it was, I just had Mr. Wood's question. I would say they should probably withdraw their initial motion
I'll withdraw my, I don't know if I made the
on
motion.
the
to say
emergency basis.
Emergency.
Right, that's the initial motion, is just, you're just,
Who made the motion for the emergency?
I have it as, yeah.
so as long as the initial proponent withdraws the emergency, you'll still have the underlying motion, which is the motion to approve.
So we're treating this as a regular
It's a
resolution.
regular resolution.
Keeping
It's
it
just,
at the
it is
council
clean,
Keeping
it
it
is
council.
cleaner that way.
Mr. President, I'd like to withdraw the motion.
All right, very good then. All right, so the sponsors have withdrawn their request for emergency treatment.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to carry this over to our next regularly scheduled meeting.
And I'll second that.
Very good. We have motion and a
Yeah,
second.
the
At the council
council
level, yeah,
level,
yeah, not referring.
Onto a vote.
Any further discussion? And seeing none, if I could ask for we would just need a voice vote, I think, in this, given the
I
circumstances.
just think, well, this is a first reading, so we just automatically carry over to the next meeting, correct?
Then,
Right,
then
it's
very
not
good.
getting
We don't need to
referred
vote on anything right now.
So that's it.
No, we have a motion, we
No,
might
we
as well
have to
just.
vote
We
on
still
it.
have to vote
Yeah, we
to
have to still.
I'm
approve it.
sorry, the motion, I'm sorry.
Motion to keep
All
it
right.
at council, right?
So it's a motion to bring it back at our next meeting, which would be our next meeting next week.
Next week.
All right?
That's fine.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? I see none. Thank you very much.
And I'm sorry to have delivered that advice. I really didn't like doing that in this context, to be honest with you. But
And we're
Understood.
gonna do it, we're gonna do it right.
Understood.
It's always my fault.
We have before us,
Counselor Gallagher would have an issue with it, so we'll speak for him. When you're not here, that's what happens.
that's right. Resolution FY 23-003, the fiscal year 2024 budget resolution. Counselor Wood.
Yeah, so let me just be very brief. This is what we see annually. It kicks off the budget season. It creates, it articulates a strategy that the finance team, which is many people, including the town manager, FinCom, us, everyone else, needs to follow. In other years, it's been more strict, and this year it's just strategy. I'm hoping that this becomes a behavior that the council or FinCom carries forward, because it's been very beneficial over the years, taking us from a negative $750,000 free cash up to a $3 million free cash, based on the policies that we set in the initial resolution. And this has worked out with the finance director, so this is all good language.
Motion to refer to budget and finance committees?
The words right out of my
Second.
mouth. Thank you. And a second?
Yep.
Very good. And if we could have, please, a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I see none. Thank you. Citizen comments. If there are any citizens who care to address the council, I see none at the moment, so I think we can move on. Council comments, and I'd like to, once again, if I could, please begin with Councilor Perry.
Thank you very much. All right, a couple things I'll mention. Certainly want to commend all the towns that got together in West Bridgewater for the Veterans Day Parade and the gathering that they had. Their gazebo there was very well attended, both with participants and townspeople. The weather held off, and we had a very nice Veterans Day ceremony there. Next year, we'll be in East Bridgewater, they'll commemorating their bicentennial as well, and we'll get it back here in Bridgewater in 2 years. Second, I'd also just like to make a statement, an announcement that, for those that don't know yet, the Christmas on the Common decorations that have been provided over the years by the Lions Club will be back in place this year. The Lions Club will continue that tradition of putting them out there. We just recently had a little get-together of members and a number of volunteers who help refurbish, repaint, and revitalize some of the decorations that we'll be putting out there this year. So I want to thank all those people that came out to help us do that this past weekend, including Councilor Wood, who is with us here today. So for those that were worried that they weren't going to be out there, I want to just announce that they will be there right after Thanksgiving. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. And if I could please, Counselor Souza.
It's a little chilly in here, so I'm not going to say very much. Other than, I hope at the next meeting, which is a week from today, it's either 70 degrees outside or in here. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Counselor George.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I'll reiterate what Dr. Perry said in regards to, very nice that we're going to have a Christmas on the, holiday decorations, lights, that effect. I hope that everyone on social media that was up in arms when they thought it wasn't going to happen, that was saying that we would happen, show up. Because as I've said before, many hands make light work. So I hope to see, by last count, probably 150 to 200 people on the common, ready to go.
That might be too many people,
Well,
but that's all right.
you know what? That's the number I have in my head. But also, it very much appreciative to the Lions Club every year. They've done it for, 30, 40 years, whatever the case may be. But I'm also very encouraged to see, I'm starting to see a lot more of the business owners in Bridgewater becoming much more involved in the town, either through the Bridgewater Business Association or just on their own. And I don't think there's any community out there that is successful that doesn't have business owner support, be it, as I said, from an association or an individual. So I hope that carries over, and I should say, I hope that continues, so we can see a lot of progress on a go-forward basis. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Moore.
Sure. So I had the opportunity to present to the 8th grade last week. So I did a 90-minute auditorium presentation on local government, state government, and federal government. So I wanted to thank Ms. Kelly and Mr. Califf for inviting me in to do that. It was great engagement. We looked at some old pictures of Bridgewater and some new pictures of Bridgewater, and we talked about how technology changes created the need for some government roles, and got some really great questions. And so I was really impressed with the level of involvement and participation, and even got some follow-up emails. So it was great. And I did get a question about brown water. So everywhere for sure. But one thing aside from it being a great experience and really appreciating the way that our schools are bringing local government to the kids in our town. One of the kids, actually, as I was showing a picture, it was an old farm, and today is now a park. He raised his hand. He was like, that was my family's farm. And all of his friends were like, no way, that wasn't your family. And then so later I went back and got some more details, and it turns out that it was his, I think, great-grandfather had owned it, given it to his grandfather, and at some point it got donated to the town. But it was interesting to me that there's someone in this town that has like this immense pride in sort of their history here, and the rest of the town doesn't have a great way to know about that, right? There's not a plaque on that land, and so maybe just as food for thought, I'm not quite sure how to do it, but I think there are so many people that are giving to the town and volunteering in the town. It would be great if we as a town found some way to keep that contribution permanent, and I don't know if it's bricks in a park or signs in, the academy building, but something that kid could point to show his friends what his family has done for the town. So if people have ideas on how we maybe can recognize those contributions and volunteers, that comment, sort of stuck with me a little bit. So.
Well, thank you, Counselor. Counselor Wood.
Thanks. We're part of the downtown revitalization, Councilor Perry and I, and it's a really challenging assignment because there's so many different opinions, but I just wanted to point out that this week was again, or within the past several weeks, we see a high level of change in the comments. So Summer Street Cafe closed. Is a good operation, great people. I'm not sure what the underlying issue was, but Summer Street Cafe closed. And at the same time, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, Gonzalez Mexican opened up down on Broad Street. By the way, great burrito. And Fiesta is opening up where Chessman's was. So we've seen Chessman's turn over, the Brazilian place turn over to Mexican. We're hearing the Periwinkles is going to move, and a couple other slots will probably change at the same time. So that's just something I've noticed over the years talking about the Common, because Years ago, when I talked to the planner, at that point, we were walking around and he's saying, well, the vacancy rate's about the same as elsewhere. And there were different businesses in place at that point. So as we think about what do we want our downtown to be, we need to think about what businesses support and the turnover and how to make that easier or harder, as the case may be. But welcome to the new establishments. Hopefully they do well. And the donut truck helped us with breakfast on Sunday morning when we were painting up holiday decorations, and that was an awesome experience as well. And then the other thing is the voting package. So the staff at the vote handed out, I know they ran out at about 11:20 in the morning, and so they probably handed out about 4,000 of these for the upcoming January 7th. I thought that was awesome. I helped set up the room for the vote Monday night before the vote, help the movers and Marilee and the other folks there, and that was an educating thing as well. And so I don't want to brag, but I got closest to the number for the vote. So we were having the slow poll between everybody there. So good job again. But that's when I saw I almost tripped on the pavement myself, and I know other people that are going to trip on that pavement. But I think overall is for a midterm, it was a big vote. The team really handled it well. No issues. The early voting was, I thought, spectacular. And hopefully the next couple votes go as smoothly as that one. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Rushton.
I have no comment, thank you.
Thank you. For myself, I just want to mention, it's already been discussed a bit, but I thought that the town's involvement in Veterans Day celebrations was really very, very inspiring. I had an opportunity to participate in the ceremony at the Senior Center featuring the singing trooper. And as I had witnessed last year, he, of course, is such a phenomenal showman. I think that was well enjoyed by all in attendance. And I did participate with a number of the councilors in the Veterans Day Parade in West Bridgewater over this weekend. And once again, a very inspiring event, and I think it was well attended. And certainly I want to convey once again my congratulations to the Tri-Town Parade Committee and to the town of West Bridgewater for having hosted the event, and as well to acknowledge the bicentennial of West Bridgewater. Certainly they've had a number of events celebrating that occasion this year already, and I think it's very heartening to see that kind of pride and involvement. So that's all I have. I would just want to remind councilors that our next meeting is next Tuesday evening, of course, because of the last week's town election, or state election, I should say. And so, obviously, being a holiday week, I'm concerned about the potential lack of a quorum to hold that meeting. And to the extent that councilors have information that would indicate that you're not likely to attend on next Tuesday evening, if you could please alert us. I would suggest please alert Deborah at the earliest opportunity, so that we kind of know where we stand going into that meeting next Tuesday. But that's all I have, and I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion and a second. And all those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Opposed? No one. Amazing.